by June. It honestly, truthfully looks like we may actually hit herd immunity before June. So, as we can see real quick, just with a couple little quick things right here, we can see a couple links, one from ABC, one from Fox News, both of them saying the case has been overlooked by 8 times as much. Now, one could assume if they think about things, those 8 times as much cases are from winter, spring, in summer, and the testing has been a lot more extensive. You can compare the death to cases ratios from those 3 seasons to this fall, and we're not seeing that same 8 times as many cases being missed right now, I don't believe. But if we took those 8-time cases and went back a little bit, just a tiny little bit, when there's 15 million cases, which literally just days ago, we get 120 million cases we've already had so far. That's plausible. It literally is plausible. It's literally what the experts are saying is plausible. We might have missed that many cases, very likely with everything going on. You can see that between the daily death to case ratio. If you look back at the charts, that's another thing. I can't find the charts. I looked at the charts earlier today. I was looking at 400,000 cases today, about the same the past 2 days before. 400. That was actually yesterday. 400,000 cases yesterday. I think there's another 4,000 today, which jumped up on my live COVID. Which jumped up on the live COVID feed right over there. I watched it. So I thought it went up 200,000. It went up another 200,000. It's 400,000 today. I went checked the graph charts. I went back on Google. Couldn't find those charts because they're probably pretty disturbing when you look at it like 400,000, 400,000, 400,000. Now, so if we're missing 8 times as many cases before, and now we're having 400,000 cases, that'd be over 3 million cases. Oh, that's not what's going on. We're not missing that many cases. But if before we're missing 8 times the cases, what if we're missing 2.5 times the cases? 2.5 times. Some people very asymptomatic, just don't know what it is, just didn't get a test, all those things. What if we're missing 2.5 times the cases? Let's just say, because they didn't get a test, they're not officially counted. That would mean there's 1 million cases a day, right? And maybe we're just doing way better testing now than we were X amount of weeks ago when we were having 200,000 cases a day. I don't know if that's true. Maybe then we're having missing 5 times cases. But if we took the statistic of 1 million cases a day and times it by 6 months, 180 days, putting us X amount into June, we'd get 180 million cases stacked on top of the 120 million we already have. We only have 330 million people about in this country, so that's over 90%. That's like 90%. So that's, we can't get that high of herd immunity at that speed because it starts slowing down. But that's what we're set at the current pace, it seems like. Now, if we believe that 400,000 and just say, well, we were missed a little bit. We only missed 500,000. Then we get 90 million new cases by June. Of course, it's going to start tapering down as herd immunity goes up. So you wouldn't get that same direct amount. In fact, it might actually skyrocket up and then go down. So we're just averaging it out. Half of them would be 90 million. And let's say, we didn't miss 8 times as many cases. We don't have 120 million cases. We overall cases at this point, but only 90 million. That's 180 million people out of 330 million. So, now we're getting above that 50% mark, or 55%. Well, if we start taking 60% get herd immunity, then all the vaccines come out, and half the country takes the vaccines. We're at 55%. So now half the country takes a vaccine. Let's take the other 45%, cut it in half. That's 22% on to 55%. Now we're up to 77%, and we're a pretty good way into herd immunity. And that's if, we are not getting that much more than 400,000 cases a day, which we are. They're saying 400,000. They're not. Even the experts say themselves, hey, we missed 8 times those cases. So if we're just going, hey, we missed 2.5 times, we get this. Wow, we're about to skyrocket up, and then by spring we'll be tapering it off, and we'll already have achieved herd immunity. So maybe that million is too much right now. Maybe we're not missing 2.5 times the cases currently speaking with this 400,000 a day for the past few days now. And I was shocked by seeing that 400,000. It's not something I've heard today. 400,000 for the past few days. In fact, those same charts and graphs I was looking at, get that information on, track it. It just started coming up on Google, so put a bunch of little different keywords in there. It just didn't come up, and then like the first time, things would come up every time they'll charge, and I go through them. That's disturbing. But if we look at it and we do the math, we can see that, yeah, we'll be at herd immunity by summertime, for sure. If herd immunity is 60%, it does look like even at the lower projections of things we can make, we'll be almost at 60%. Even with those lower projections we make, and remember, we're not going to have that many vaccines even until after June, So then, most people are going to get it. I would assume over 60% by June. And, when you have that many missing cases, the death ratio is lower. So if we looked at all those and you go over that article on that website, you kind of see me going over a little bit. I was pretty tired when I wrote it. I'm exhausted right now. Just not as tired as I was when I wrote that. Neighbor wakes me up all the time. It's horrible, horrible, bad, bad, bad. Bad, bad, bad. But basically, we can... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there talking about that bad, loud band next door. But, the fact is that, simply put, we're going to reach herd immunity. It seems like we're on track for that to happen by, June. It seems like we've been very pushed through this intentionally. And then after that point, once we basically hit herd immunity, it seems like then the vaccines will come in and then push us even further past that. That does seem like a trend that's kind of happening worldwide. We see lower cases in other countries. They're not as good at testing as us, and things like that. And, we're basically all going to start hitting herd immunity, and then the vaccines are going to push us well over, and there is a chance that if we can get the high enough levels, that drastically reduces the chance of this thing being a virus that's always in our life. Maybe manipulation of why this happened in this way, barbaric, low IQ way, still, the implementation of that. But that does seem like that's a potential scenario, just that in itself. This is the plan. But push through to, it's going to be over 50% by June of natural herd immunity by these numbers. That's what's looking like. Easily 60% or higher. If you do some of the math on these things, like I said, if we're getting 1 million a day, and we already had 8 times that number, 15 million from a little bit ago, 120 million a day for 6 months, that's 300 million. Of course, it's going to tick up, then tick down, so we're just averaging it out, then it's going to slow down at some point, so we wouldn't hit that 300 million mark. But it's going to slow down because of herd immunity. Is going to start kicking in, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to see it go up, and we're going to see it go down, and unless there's a new mutation or some real nasty tricks of this thing being chronic and staying around, I think we might actually see this thing go away, because once we've established herd immunity, that's when all the vaccines are going to come out and push that further. So all the people that didn't get it, we get 50% of people vaccinated, and let's say this is a very contagious thing. So let's say we get 2/3 of people or more with that herd immunity. It's an easy number, 60%, and half the people get a vaccine. That's half of 40%, the other left over, that's 20% plus, it's 80%. Now, if those are even higher, if we had 65 or 70% of people get natural immunity through this thing, which is plausible, then the vaccines come out, we have 2/3 of the people get vaccinated, it's possible to get over 90% immunity to this thing, and potentially, that is enough to get rid of it. I don't know. It's could it hang out in some small isolated areas? It will come back like H1N1 done in a lesser form. Could it possibly come back in a more virulent form? It's not something we want to live with. We have to realize is that when they say people die of old age, it's really kind of the flu that takes them out. It's just they're very old. They call it old age, but it is the flu, and it is generally a virus or bacterial infection that really finishes it. And if we cannot finish this COVID, this is going to be what gets us in our later years. It's just not going to be the flu. It's going to happen a few years earlier because of COVID potentially. So, if we get that high enough herd immunity rate, that might not happen. We could kill it. We could kill COVID off. And not a big fan of the way things have happened at all. But we have been pushed through in such a way that we're going to have a very high natural herd immunity before the vaccines come out, and that will push us very far into, very good herd immunity. But I believe we need to get that very significantly high to truly get rid of it, and that would have to also be worldwide. There's a lot of different vaccines coming out. Like, to be a lot of different types. You know, it's not going to really be the ones available for most people until June. So, you know, so over the next couple of years, we get up to that, like I said, natural herd immunity. I think we're going to get over 60%. But we get those, if we get some whopping number, 65, 70%, and then the vaccines come through and 2/3 are taking it, you know, we can hit that 90% number, but we need 95 to really wipe this thing out forever. I don't know. I mean, maybe not. If we could at some point have a very but if worldwide we had a 30 days, even in 2 or 3 years, 30 days, stop the flu, the COVID, doesn't matter what it is, 30 days promoted, wash your hands, wear masks, social distance, you know, do extra testing for all the flus and everything, and just in the middle of winter, the whole world for 30 days is like, screw this thing, you know, and literally try to reduce these things. Maybe if we had some, you know, projects like that, a lot of testing still, and we could find those little pockets worldwide and reduce that further. I think it's possible to eradicate COVID. I do. I think that it's because the vaccines push that over naturally, what it would naturally be. So, well, I mean, you get, you know, 78% herd immunity, it starts tapering off, but there's always enough that a highly infectious thing kind of linger in some populations. Even if it's a remote village and come back out years later, like H1N1 done, even though in a less, you know, assumedly deadly version, maybe it's just that everybody has some immunity from it because everybody got it, you know, all those years back. But maybe it's been around before, we shouldn't have as good detection. We're like, oh no, H1N1's back, and turns out like it came around in the 50s once and came back in the 70s another time, which is we're good at detecting it. But I think it's possible to wipe it out, potentially, depending on how much it mutates and things, and how far those mutations differ from what we're dealing with now, because it's a very contagious thing. So it is more contagious than flu. Like, yeah, the death rate isn't too much higher than the flu. I mean, you look at the math and like, oh, 1%, but really, is it even 0.3%? Is it? I don't know, but it's way more contagious. It's way more contagious. It's a much higher R naught, as they call it, 4+ times higher than the flu. So that means a lot more people are going to gain natural immunity to it. A lot more people are going to gain herd immunity. It's going to push you that much further than some other things with a lower R naught. At the same time, if it's that contagious, it might have the ability to keep and linger in this small population, or will everybody just get it and get herd immunity there too? So, you know, I do have questions on that end, but I hear some of these people who are saying, listen, it's going to be with us forever. It's never going away. There's no evidence of that. If you did the math right now, if you really just did the math, you'd sit here and go, yeah, we're hitting herd immunity by summer. We can see significant tapering off in spring after significant tapering up. Maybe that's what we're seeing right now. You know, and, you know, then the vaccines are going to push us that much further into that herd immunity. You know, if they get these vaccines good, you know, in a year or two, there's a bunch of different types of vaccines, you know, people take them, there's a bunch of research on them to the point where, like, people are like, hey, you know, these vaccines aren't that bad. I think the ones right now might be a little strong in additives and things. I think that they're definitely disagreeable with people with allergies and things like that. Asthma's an allergy. I can hear some doctors talking about that type of stuff. The warning's right on them. So, you know, maybe in a year or two, we'll have way better, you know, vaccines available to the point where, like, you know, people are like, yeah, I don't care about that. It's fine. And you get like 80% of the global population taking that vaccine when you already had, you know, 70, 80% with, you know, that naturally acquired herd immunity. You know, we can get all those numbers, and it's 95%, do testing and really keep up on it. We can eradicate this thing. It does seem possible. We're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel yet, but if you have foresight, you can measure the end of the tunnel coming up. 2020 has been a horrible year for people in so many ways. You know, hopefully we can put this behind us. You know, hopefully this is not something we want lingering around in all bringing us down X amount of years early. You know, in life, we don't want that. But it does seem like this is possible to eradicate. It does seem like herd immunity is coming. I say by June it could come quicker. We just don't have all the numbers. We have the official confirmed numbers right now. Past 2 days, it's been 400,000 a day. We can see right there on the screen links, one from CBS, one from Fox. 8 times more cases than counted. That's not right now based on the 800,000 number. It's probably not based off that 200,000 number. That's more based on summer, spring, last winter. We definitely see we're missing cases. We can assume, which would not make us an asshole this time, that 400,000 cases we've seen the past few days, they didn't get everything. We know there's people with asymptomatic cases. There's people that just don't come in. It's just not that bad. Maybe people get missed for X amount of reasons. Just don't get that test. Some doctors might be jerky, right? They might not have the test available. So, 400,000 confirmed cases, that could be 600,000, 800,000 unconfirmed cases. Even at 500,000, we've seen that. We made it to 55%, based upon, being 6 times more cases from before. And then we only missed 100,000 cases. We're hitting 55%. If we average out that stuff, some real approximate math, 55% by June, and then vaccines would push us into that herd immunity. That's a low ball numbers. You know what I mean, though, and I think that we are, seeing that. Looks like we got someone in here chatting away. Bill Gates sustainable depopulation call through. I mean, honestly, when you're being lied to as much as we have, it does really open up those type of ideas. I mean, how can you, when you get lied to, all the government does is lie. Don't wear masks. You should. I mean, they're helpful to a point. Don't take the other side. Don't take vitamin D. Definitely take vitamin D. We now know that. Take shit tons. You don't even need this plague going on to take vitamin D. We literally all should be taking vitamin D, and their current mark of 1,000 units for like 125% or whatever. No, it should be more than that. At least 2,000, at least 3,000. That should be the 100% daily mark. I can't say 100%. Yeah, I believe that 5G. I'm not saying I believe in that stuff at all. I don't believe 5G is as damaging to the oxygen stuff as people say. I've read that stuff. I've seen that stuff. It's just there's so much disinformation out there. It's been geared towards political reasons to divide and conquer us. They'll sit there and they'll have you scared to brush your teeth. I don't really believe in all those type of things, but I can see why people do. I really can. When you got the government lies to you, when the government comes up, don't we wear these masks, and and then the other side's like, don't take vitamin D. It's like, what is wrong with both you people, both sides of the aisle? How could you not sit there and wonder? I don't think Bill Gates is an evil person. A lot of those things about Bill Gates, when you can see him going, and this is where a lot of these conspiracy theories come from, is when he said, if we give vaccines to this area, it lowers their population, basically. And then people are like, whoa, is this population control to kill people? And you can say, hey, there's side effects from these measles, these live virus measles vaccines gave some people the measles. Yeah, that does happen. Or maybe it was polio vaccine. It does happen. Can't say I'm the biggest fan about injecting needles from places without much oversight, like the vaccine industry itself. Like, no oversight. Of course, we're not going to make great products. That's a fact. That's simple capitalism. That's just a simple free market concept of things. You protect them that much, they're going to make bad products. But the whole thing, why he was saying it was because the mothers have 6, 8 kids. Their kids die. And they have a bunch of kids. And they need those kids to survive. So basically, when they give them those vaccines, they go, wait, my kids don't all die. I only have 2 or 3 kids. I don't need to have 8 kids. And that is basic psychology. It's something that's denoted a bunch of times. And that's where a lot of the Bill Gates conspiracy theories come from. And then they can propagate further when you get a live virus vaccine that mutates a little bit, and people do get those measles and polio. And that's what happens when you have an industry that doesn't have the type of same regulation and oversight as other industries. You get bad products that they're testing out in the third world. You know what I mean, though? But I don't think Bill Gates is a bad guy. I think we all use Bill Gates products. I'm looking at some Microsoft products right now. I don't think it's that bad. I'm not a big fan of vaccines at all. Not a big fan of needles. Petrify me. Some vaccines I find better than others, and you can do the research on how those were made. And hopefully in a year or two, we'll have a bunch of vaccines out there, and we'll have all the research, and there'll be a vaccine that I'll sit there and I'll agree with. Like, I've looked over all these things. I agree with this vaccine, and I will 100% take it, and that's from somebody who's not a big fan of needles or any of that type of stuff. Never been when I was a kid. I was a kid running to the doctor's office with them chasing me because I got to get my shots. I was that kid. You know, but, you know, I must admit, you know, I just don't, you know, 100% believe, like, you know, they haven't even isolated the alleged virus. I believe they have definitely isolated the virus. I believe you can find a paper trail of it for like 10 years, actually, in fact. You know, you can find that. And, you know, when you say all vaccines poison the human body, well, I mean, you know, they do have sometimes toxic ingredients in them to intentionally trigger an immune reaction. There's so many different ways they make them. There's so many different types of vaccines. I cannot say I agree with the science and implementation of all of them at all, but I can see why that works. If you're going to give somebody like a dead virus vaccine, right? Well, why is the body going to respond to it? It's not. So you're going to need to give them some heavy metals. And the body's like, hey, what the hell's going on here? And it finds this dead virus. Like, oh, I'm going to make some antibodies for you. You're the culprit. But it wasn't really the culprit. They'll slightly irradiate those things just so the body's like, holy shit, right there. You know, and I can find those things disagreeable. And if they do it wrong, it teaches the body not to respond to that. You know, so you can find that. You can listen to Fauci talk about those type of things. I mean, we're talking about some really, I mean, the vaccines, that's a really weird science and things. And, you know, they just haven't put as much effort into it. In the regards of safety concerns and things that would make me and you feel comfortable with it, because they don't have to, because there's no oversight. And that makes a bad product. Fact. That makes a bad product. So, you know, I mean, it would be stupid just to sit there and go, every single one of them is fine. When you can look through and be like, no, they're not fine. In fact, a lot of them, you can hear doctors say this. You can hear them say it on YouTube. They make a lot of these things from cancer cells. And they scramble the cancer cells and they say, no, they're fine. They can't do that to you. You can look at a Tasmanian devil. One Tasmanian devil scratches another Tasmanian devil, they give each other cancer. And we now know that some cancers are 100% transmissible, and it's even admitted by some of these doctors themselves. Well, yeah, I mean, that cancer cell would be transmissible, but we scramble it up. And out of all those millions of cancer cells that make up the shot that you're getting, or at least in this large batch, at least, that, you know, they all should all be scrambled, and none of them should, you know, get into your cell, but they even admit that one or two might not be. So no, I do not like any vaccines derived from cancer cells. I do not like that. They use cancer cells because they're immortal. I don't even remotely like that at all. You know, live virus vaccines, well, that can backfire on you. That can backfire pretty big on you. It's just the whole entire thing. It's a crapshoot. I mean, it's a virus. In a way, kind of do whatever it want in a way. I mean, they could sit there and say, hey, you do this, you operate this way. They can just do whatever it wants, mutate in some bizarre way. I don't like that splicer stuff. They're using viruses to cut into DNA and things like that. But what just happens if it just, I mean, you say 1 in a million chance, 1 in a zillion chance. Okay, well, viruses operate a million and millions at a time. So what happens if a splicer virus that allows the splicer stuff to work, that allows to the gene editing, what happens if that thing goes awry? It just becomes somehow airborne and viral, because all it takes is it to somehow be in a cell with another virus. And the viruses can literally, like, get married and have kids. And then literally what happens, they can literally, if that happens, sometimes it's confused together, become a whole new virus. It's crazy the way viruses operate. And not even that. Viruses actually can infect human cells. X amount, like 8%, whatever it is, of your DNA, or whatever is RNA. It's viral RNA. A lot of that is more from primordial times, one would assume. But basically what happens is, a lot of different ways, but how it happened now is, your sperm would get infected with the virus, which coronavirus does. What was the other one that did that? The Zika virus. That did that. And then that infected sperm fertilizes an egg. And then that can pass. That RNA is incorporate itself, the sperm will incorporate itself into the DNA of that baby, thus the Zika virus thing, those kids with those deformities. So I was kind of really waiting for that for COVID. And, you know, I haven't seen that yet. Can't say, but I'm really looking for the past few months when it would stop popping up. But I haven't seen that yet. And that was one of the things that did scare me, because we're finding it in the sperm, just the overall, what it could do to the population, what it could do to the next generation. It could make the whole next generation infertile, for all we know. We don't know. But that's the thing about, you know, evolution, right? You think that it happens at this very slow scale. You know, or one thing mutates and it's a better mutation and it survives, so it gets to fuck all the other ones, right? And everything's like it, right? But literally, that can happen on a viral level. There literally could be a virus that comes through and gives everybody the next generation, a lot of that next generation, that mutation through that viral RNA infused in the DNA. And a lot of our body processes are actually made off viruses. I think a lot of that is more in the primordial times before, even the monkey form, well before that. But a lot of those processes, a lot of the things in our body that work, a lot of them are actually RNA. It's the RNA from viruses from ancient times that our body has manipulated into working into our processes. So, it is disturbing when people are trying to push you through a pandemic when you don't know the potential end result, because there is a chance that any virus that can find itself down in the sperm, which this one has, could infect the next generation like Zika did or worse. And when you're trying to push the whole entire world through that, you don't know. And then, what happened? This thing had some retrovirus-like aspects. Let's say it's coronavirus, but, paper trail of the thing like 10 years ago into the Wuhan lab. When we did the stop the gain of research function here, that's where our legislation said, no, we're not doing that, the gain of research stuff. We're not doing that. We're not playing viruses like that. The Western doctors just set up shop in China. It was France that set up the Wuhan laboratory. For example, apparently didn't do a good job. Fauci was founding it. They all were. They moved the research over there for pennies on the dollars. They were told no. They said, fine, we'll do it in China. And they didn't even do it in the middle of the desert. They didn't even do it in the middle of the desert. So that's utterly, utterly disgusting. So, I don't really go with and subscribe to much of the far right stuff and those type of things. I find them a lot of propaganda. But some of the stuff said when it comes in concern to this, if you're sitting there talking about this looks just like a virus we found 10 years ago in a bat cave in China being studied at Wuhan, I'd sit there and say, well, I can't. It does seem like that paper trail exists. It does. I have those type of vaccine concerns. But my vaccine concerns are very rational based upon, the science. I'm not worried about microchips. I'm worried about them doing a bad job, which they do all the time. Not a big fan of it. There's no oversight. Why wouldn't they make a bad product if it doesn't matter if they do or don't, and then everybody's going to hide all the statistics and the bad effects of that product. And they had to do that just because if they didn't do that type of practices, they probably wouldn't have vaccines right now. The first vaccines were done in Valley Forge. It was George Washington. Medicine man, African medicine man, was there with them. And he, Washington listened to him. He believed them. And they did the first vaccines because they used to do them over in Africa. What they did was they took the pus from smallpox, which is a respiratory virus, if I'm not mistaken. It's a respiratory virus. But what they did was they took that and they scratched it into the shoulders of the guys. Because they were looking at a 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 death rate from smallpox in that camp. Because you're in the middle of winter, some of these guys don't have boots, dysentery, those type of issues are an issue, but you add it with the lack of food, winter, lack of clothes, and things like that. There's going to be a much higher death rate. So we're looking at 1 in 2, 1 in 3 for smallpox. Well, Washington had smallpox, so I believe his brother died of it. So he was not a fan. So they did the first vaccinations in North America. It was Washington himself at Valley Forge, and they had a 1 in 50 death rate, opposed to 1 in 2 or 3 death rate by scratching the viral, the virons or whatever in that pus on the shoulder, scratching it in the skin. So thus a respiratory infection enters through the blood and it's outside of its arena. It's outside of its battlefield. It's not used to be there. So by the time it would just happen to the bloodstream and make it somehow to the lungs, it's already been beaten up. The body's discovering it. They'll barely even make it there if they even do. And it gets beaten up. The body gets immunity. The problem with COVID, I was saying right off the bat, geez, almost seems like a year ago now, hey, maybe we should think about that exact same thing, but turns out COVID does just fine in the blood and the gut and outside the lungs. It doesn't seem like scratching into you is going to be this huge difference between a 1 in 3 to a 1 in 50. So, vaccines are an American thing. Live virus vaccines. I mean, that sounds kind of stupid. There's a lot of those. You could come up with we could have found if we had the least deadly version of corona. We tested all the corona, took all the samples, found the least deadliest corona there was, and then somehow in the lab made it less deadly. You gain a research function, take away, a function, but it still has those same type of spikes or something, and then use that as a live virus vaccine. That would have been something smart to do. I'm not even sure if they tried that. Not saying that would have been a great vaccine. Hey, let me spray a live virus COVID spray right in my nose. But I mean, if you're getting to the point of hey, I'm going to get, this really deadly version of COVID going around. We have this less deadly one that we manipulated even less deadly. I'm going to take it on my terms and stay away from everybody for a week, and we'll have all the medicine ready and everything ready. We'll know what happened. If things go south in me, we'll have this very plotted out in a chart of how to respond to those type of issues. That could have been a potential way to do things. Live virus vaccines. So it's a very and that's what Washington was doing, live virus vaccine, right? They're just just using a different medium than it liked. So it does get me. But the good thing about the vaccines are we're getting pushed through. Not that I was happy with that it happened. I think they're monsters, but we got pushed through to herd immunity. And that's what's happening. By June, we're going to be at herd immunity. The minimum numbers I went through earlier here was 55%. Very, very conservative numbers. We start getting, higher numbers. We're looking up to, 70%, 80% herd immunity by June. Then the vaccines come in. So if we have 2/3 of the people taking vaccines, we already got up to 75%. You know what I mean, though? Now we're looking at some pretty major herd immunity, much more herd immunity that can naturally happen on its own, enough to potentially eradicate COVID-19. It's potential. It's potential, and I think that we're going to get to that point where it's a potential, and we need to finish it off and say, you know what? We should take 30 days and all wear a mask and do tests even in the next winter, even if it's not around, and find if there's any little pockets of it and really go after those things worldwide and eradicate COVID. Because the way that we got pushed through it, which I disagree with, is going to get us in a very high herd immunity. And then the vaccines come, and they're going to push us very far into that herd immunity to the point where eradication is possible. And it is going to be so stupid if we just don't go that extra mile after how far we've already marched on this forced march, I might add. So awesome. Grant, check it again. Come over to paradoxchronicle.com. I'm going to tell you, I don't 100% agree with your logic of things. I don't really agree with that logic, and hopefully you can get on board with my thought process, but I think it's way better than the